You know, thousands of us get pulled over in our cars every day. A routine traffic stop. It's something most of us have been through. But what happened on one particular night on a roadside in Essex, Maryland? Well, it turned into one of the most profoundly disturbing discoveries that law enforcement officers would ever have to face. Let's dig into the events that led to this absolutely horrifying moment.
And these are the words, the truly chilling words spoken by the driver, 33-year-old Nicole Johnson, right to a police officer. Watch tomorrow. Y'all are going to see me on the news. I mean, talk about prophetic. She had no clue just how right she was, or that her life and the lives of everyone at that scene was about to change forever.
So let's back up. It all kicks off just after 11 p.m. on July 28, 2021. An officer with the Baltimore County Police Department sees a car speeding and pulls it over. Seems like a simple, everyday thing, right? But this routine stop was about to spiral into a scene of just unimaginable horror. Okay, so the initial reason for the stop was speeding, but as the officer starts running her information, the problems just keep stacking up. First, Johnson has no valid driver's license. Then, he sees the registration tags are fake. And to top it all off, the car itself isn't even registered. So at this point, it's pretty clear the car has to be impounded. And protocol says before they can tow it, they have to do a standard inventory search.
So when Johnson realizes she's about to lose her car, she makes this desperate plea. She tells the officer, "Me and my kids literally living in the car." You know, she's claiming they're homeless, that this car is their only shelter. And for a moment, you can imagine that adds this layer of sympathy to the whole thing. But that feeling was about to change. Drastically. Right, so the officers are getting ready to do that inventory search before the tow truck shows up. And that's when they notice it. Something is wrong. Really wrong. It's not just that the car is messy. There's a smell. A powerful, absolutely sickening smell coming from inside. And you hear one officer say it quietly to the other. Something dead or something. They knew that smell. It wasn't garbage. It wasn't old food. Through their training, their experience on the job, they recognized that scent. It's the kind of smell that can only mean one thing: decay, death. So Nicole Johnson, she tries to explain it away. She's like, oh, it's just a bunch of dirty clothes, dirty blankets. They've been sitting there for months and months. But the officers, they're not buying it for a second. One of them says flat out, that don't smell like dirty clothes. And then they see it, bugs crawling on some of the bags. At that point, there's no doubt. That is the unmistakable stench of decay.
So now, all their attention is laser focused on the trunk. They absolutely have to find out what's causing that smell. They can see it's buried under just layers and layers of trash bags and blankets. Okay, so one of the officers starts the grim task of literally cutting through all these trash bags. And underneath everything, they find a black suitcase. And then, in this totally bizarre twist, Nicole actually tells the officer to open it. She wants him to prove it's nothing. So he does. He opens the bag, and what he saw was just unthinkable.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's the first thing you hear an officer say. Just a raw, horrified reaction. And in that one single moment, this routine traffic stop completely transforms into an absolute nightmare of a crime scene. Because inside that suitcase were the decomposing remains of a small child.
And even for these officers, guys who have probably seen some terrible things in their careers, this was too much. The fallout was just immediate. They were visibly shaken, some getting physically sick. Johnson and her friend were taken into custody right away. One officer literally takes off running, just overwhelmed by it all. Another is so shaken up he starts reciting a prayer to himself. And the horror, it wasn't even over. When homicide detectives arrived, they found a second child's body, this time in a plastic tote, also in the trunk. Okay, so Johnson is now in custody. The investigation shifts away from that horrific scene on the side of the road and into an interrogation room. The big questions for investigators now are, who were these children and what on earth happened to them? And the victims, they were identified as Nicole Johnson's own niece and nephew, 7-year-old Joshlyn Johnson and 5-year-old Larry O'Neill. Just heartbreaking. It turns out their mother, who is Nicole's sister, had left the kids with her about 2 years earlier. She thought they were going to be safe, that they were going to be cared for. When you look at the timeline here, the true horror of how long this went on really sinks in. Josh Manobolin, the little girl, she died way back in May of 2020. That's more than a full year before this traffic stop. So for over a year, Nicole Johnson was just living, traveling with her niece's body in a suitcase in her car. And the tragic irony is just unbelievable. In April 2021, her sister sends her a text saying thank you for taking care of them so well. She had absolutely no idea that her daughter was already gone. So when she's being interrogated, Johnson tries to spin this whole thing as a series of tragic accidents. She actually says, "I took care of them children so good," like it was a mistake. She insists she was a good caregiver and claims that what happened to Joshlyn, her 7-year-old niece, was just discipline that went too far. Here's her story. She said she was frustrated because she wasn't getting any support from her family, and she beat Joshlyn for taking food from the fridge. She claims the little girl then fell and hit her head on the floor. But instead of calling 911 or getting any kind of help, Johnson says she just laid Joshlyn's body in a bed and then later put her in that suitcase. Her story about 5-year-old Larry's death is even more vague. This happened just 2 months before she was arrested. She just says she got injured while they were playing, and then she recounts his last words. And this is just chilling. She says he got drowsy and asked her, "Honey, can you lay me down?" So she laid him down in the backseat of the car, and he never woke up.
But this is where her whole story about being a good caregiver just completely disintegrates. She insisted they ate all the time. I didn't starve to him, though. But the medical examiner's findings, they tell a completely different, absolutely gruesome story. Joshlyn, a 7-year-old girl, weighed only 18 pounds. Larry, at 5 years old, weighed just 21 pounds. The doctors were clear. Weights that low could only come from one thing: months and months of severe starvation and neglect.
So now you have the physical evidence, and it completely demolishes her claims. With that, the legal process kicks into gear to try and get some kind of justice for Joshi and Larry. And the final investigation, well, it painted an incredibly damning picture. Both of the children's deaths were officially ruled homicides. The cause, physical abuse, and just profound neglect. Their bodies were covered in bruises, and what's maybe most heartbreaking is that they were complete ghosts in the system. Neither child was ever enrolled in school in Maryland, they were never taken to a doctor, and no one ever reported them missing.
For all of this, Nicole Johnson was indicted on a whopping 14 criminal counts. The most serious charges, of course, were the 2 counts of first-degree child abuse that resulted in death.
In the end, on August 13th, 2024, Nicole Johnson pleaded guilty. She pleaded to those 2 most severe charges, officially taking legal responsibility for causing the deaths of her niece and nephew. And in February of 2025, the sentence came down. She got life in prison, but with all but 50 years suspended. So what does that mean? It means she'll serve up to 50 years behind bars, and if she's ever released, she'll have another 5 years of supervised probation. And all of this just leaves us with a really final haunting question, doesn't it? This wasn't some sudden, explosive act of violence. This was a slow, hidden, grinding erosion of life. It was starvation and neglect. You have these 2 little kids existing in hotel rooms, living out of a car on city streets with an aunt who is still talking to their family. It just forces you to ask, in a world with neighbors, family, and social services that are supposed to protect kids, how does a tragedy like this stay hidden for so long? How did 2 small children fall through every single crack, suffering in total silence until it's just far too late?